Continuing reading Dallas Pimiento Book 2 on Bronco 2, starting with a piece called Goose Tally F Marathon. "What's the tally so far, Lou?" Doug Meber asked as he passed the red and black striped booth. "Haven't started the tally yet, Doug," Lou politely, if exasperatedly, answered the portly Meber. "Better get your pencil sharpened," Meber advised. "They are," Lou said softly. He had learned over the years that controlling his breathing was the key to controlling his emotions. Failing to get a rise out of the man, Meber nodded majestically and moved on. His hands wandered over the material of his green sweater, feeling both its soft wool and the girth of his belly beneath. What could he find to eat around here? The festival was not extensive. It only covered the empty lot next to Distributor Park, but there were several booths selling snacks. Meber smelled many good things. He came across a booth selling some sort of sausage on a stick. He bought one and continued on his way, dipping the sausage into a small paper cup of dark mustard. He was confident that the marathon would be run today. On the other side of the accumulation of people and booths, two young lovers, Trip Sedgum and Willa Weiss, were arguing. "I've been planning on entering the marathon all year," Trip tried to make Willa see the depth of feeling that she was denying. "You have not." Her flat refusal to countenance the truth was infuriating, maddening. Trip wanted to cut her head off with a saw, but at least she had acknowledged his arguments by responding to something he had actually said. Trip supposed that was progress. "I have to. After last year when nobody entered, I got to thinking about it. I remember because it was that weekend after the festival that I decided to come next year. I would do it." "Well, first of all," Willa fought back, "then it hasn't been a whole year that you've been planning this suicidal nonsense." "Suicidal?" Trip ignored her trivial technicality. "Yes, suicidal. I don't want to lose you, Trip." She gripped his arm tightly. "I'm not going into this thing to get killed, Willa. You never know when the below-grounders will take a sacrifice." Traditional display of integrated blossoms. Tomatoville's Red Garland Festival always concluded with the traditional display of integrated blossoms. Triblaine Weiss looked forward to this part of the weekend, but her husband, Wetch, found it boring. Still, he faithfully accompanied Triblaine to the display. He carried a small folding stool and a paperback along. "There's Casero," Triblaine excitedly told her husband. Wetch was not slow in realizing that she was not concerned with whether or not he'd received the information. She would have done the same if he had been a hand puppet. In fact, it occurred to him that he could walk away and she would probably not notice. Triblaine had long ago stopped trying to interest him in flowers and plants, just as he had stopped trying to interest her in the history of 1960s design. The only difference was that it had taken him many years longer to realize the futility of his attempts than it had her. As Wetch set up his little stool and took out his book, Triblaine said hello to Casero, a sleepy-eyed man whose attachment to the festival was ill-defined, but as traditional as the blossom display. After somewhat vacantly acknowledging the woman's greeting and rambling small talk, Casero turned back to the two people he had been conversing with, one of whom was holding a tiny black dog in the crook of his arm, while the other had a strikingly similar puppet on his hand. The one with the dog watched Triblaine move away. He asked Casero in a whisper, "Who is that?" Casero glanced back. He considered a moment. "An astronaut, a botanist, a progressive wanderer," he replied in his Captain Beefheart-like voice. Meanwhile, Wetch Weiss concentrated on moving closer to the end of Mandate for Change, the book he was reading. He had wanted to read it for some time, over 10 years, and now found himself almost halfway through it. It was a real labor. He didn't care for it at all. It was well written, there was no denying that. It was just that he would rather be reading something else. Weiss got to the end of an auspiciously numbered page, 1/16 more of the book, and he would have reached the midpoint. He looked up from his reading and looked for his wife. There she was, talking to some abysmal nobody by a particularly frightening arrangement of weeds. How did she know all these people? Doll supplied for intergalactic overnighter. The Vandal Bean Company didn't just grow beans. Those who thought of nothing more than beans when they heard the name were just the sort of people that exasperated the executives at Vandal. There was constant talk of changing their corporate nomenclature, to use Harry Shearer's wonderful phrase, to reflect the company's modern focus, its diverse fields of interest. But written into the bylaws of the trust fund that still controlled over half the shares of the company was the injunction that the name never be changed. Old Thaddeus Vandal would rise from his tomb should such a disruption take place. Arguments that only the bean part need be changed fell on the deaf ears of his descendants. One of the most exciting of the company's many realms was its space program. With its wide range of genetically engineered pods, it was able to produce transport for both passengers and cargo to several places scattered throughout the Neuronic archipelago. Though not yet as well known on this planet as the executive board would like, the Van Bean Company's Starways division was slowly garnering a reputation for safety, comfort, and reliability. So safe was Vandal's personal pod system considered by Norris Richter that he had consented to sending his daughter Mondria and her friends to High Drama Exodus for her birthday sleepover. Although his wife worried about the trip, she was going along as a chaperone. Richter assured her to his own satisfaction. "It's a Vandal product," he told her solemnly. At the last second, it transpired that one of the girls had forgotten to bring a doll along, important for the girls' bonding rituals and general silliness. Proving Richter's faith in his employers, a doll was provided to the girl out of company stores. It was green and somewhat vegetative in appearance, but it would suffice. "It had better," muttered Stan to his co-worker Wanda after the pod had been launched. "They put me through hell over that doll." "How bitter you are," said Wanda. "Don't you like making a little girl happy?" "Not really." Stan stapled a stack of papers. "How about a whole bunch of little girls?" "Even less so." "Not to change the subject, Stan, but I wanted to ask you about a rumor I heard." Wanda spoke quietly. "I heard that the Vagary Church owns Vandal." A limbo. "I'm sorry, Mr. Pimiento, but although I like your work, I just don't think I can sell it," the gallery owner sorrowfully explained to our titular hero. "No market for it, eh?" Pimiento asked. "It's not that there is no market for your kind of work. It's just that my clientele tends to be more conservative in their tastes." "Can you recommend a gallery that caters to the kind of people who might be attracted to my kind of work?" Pimiento suspected that the man was thinking mental hospital and might respond so. "I would try the Martyr Gallery." "And where is that?" "I think it's on Blackout Street." Pimiento headed there immediately after he had had lunch at a Mexican restaurant. At the gallery, he was instructed to leave his packet of photographs of his work. He would be contacted in a few weeks. So he went home and put his concerns about the marketing of his paintings out of his mind. He concentrated on the work itself. After a month had passed, he paid a visit to the Martyr Gallery. Once again, he was disturbed to see just how many vintage comic books they had on sale there. He asked if any decision had been made on his paintings being accepted for show at the place. "You dropped off some paintings?" asked the young, oddly dressed girl behind the counter. "No, a packet of photographs of my work," Pimiento told her. She looked under the counter, on the floor, glanced at the door to the back room. Maybe help would arrive from that source? "I don't know anything about it. Why don't you come back tomorrow? The owner will be back by then," she begged him. "Fine," thought Pimiento. Unfortunately, it was another week until he could get back to the gallery. The owner was not there. "Well, could I at least get my photographs back?" Pimiento was exasperated. "What did they look like?" the girl asked him. She, like the girl before, looked around the place blankly. Pimiento left. He never got his photographs back. At least an indication of gargoyliness. Clamdigger's Cathedral was the site of Albert's suicide. Having both wrecked beyond repair his car and received a thorough dressing down from each of his parents, he returned to work on Monday to find that he had been fired on the recommendation of Norris Richter. By the end of the week, Albert was dead. He had jumped from one of the buttresses that overlooked the entrance to the underground laboratory. "The head priest tells me that the boy worked in the lab," Detective Calcier pointed to the floor as he reported to his superior, General Wash. "What lab, Wash?" General Washhead. "What lab?" Washhead took his thumbnail out from between his teeth to ask. "The Vandal Company's lab." Again, Calcier pointed to the floor. "Why are you pointing down like that?" The general looked puzzled. He was a stout, round-faced man whose bristling mustache and heavy nostril hair knew no clear demarcation. The Vandal Company maintains a research lab in the catacombs beneath the cathedral. Calcier could not believe that the general did not know of these things. Catacombs? Wash had repeated, taking a step back and looking down, as if he expected to see the floor open up on untold horrors. You didn't know about this, General? Asked Calcier. I'm not a religious man, Calcier, as you know. Wash had sniffed. He glanced over at the door through which a couple of policemen, wet with rain, were entering. Well, gentlemen, asked Washhead. We spoke to someone who works in the lab through the door, said one of the uniformed men. Through the door? Washhead didn't like that. Yes, sir, they wouldn't let us in without a warrant, and they refused to come out. Well, what did this person say? Washhead demanded. He said it was a tragedy. It certainly is. Calcier, you handle this. I'm going to lunch. The general slouched away. He opened his umbrella at the door and left. Here comes the head priest, one of the policemen whispered to Calcier. Detective, how much longer will you and your men be here? Asked a strangely attired old man who now approached. I guess we'll be leaving now, Calcier answered. Good, the priest sighed. The noontime ritual of the feathering is already late. Need to get mandate for change. Somehow, Alton Glastonbury found out that Wetch Weiss was reading Mandate for Change. This brought out the old jealous, curious, and suspicious feelings that Weiss inspired in him. I wonder what that book is about, he mused aloud in front of his wife as he watched Weiss from his parlor window across the street from Weiss's house. His wife ignored him. Later that day, as soon as it was convenient, Glastonbury went into town to the only bookstore he had ever patronized, Stools. He headed methodically, moving inch by inch along the shelves, starting at the front of the store and moving towards the back. He had barely covered a tiny fraction of the store stock when he made his first exclamation of distress. He exhaled harshly, baffled at the sheer multitude of titles to pick through. Another sound, sharper and whinier this time, brought him help. May I help you find something, sir? Asked a matronly woman about Glastonbury's own age. Do you have Mandate for Change? He blurted out. By Flump Richardson, the woman queried. Yes, I'm sure we do. She beckoned him to follow her, adding, It won't be in the young ladies' romance section. $29.95. Glastonbury read the price aloud with heat. That's over $30 with tax. He looked at his helper. She adopted a blank expression. Now, wishing he had tried the library first, Glastonbury carried the book to the checkout counter. It was too late for that route now, however. He was already here. He doubted the accuracy of the transaction as the same woman who had helped him rang him up and handed him his change. He was on the verge of saying something, but a laborious toil through mental calculations partially reassured him. Back at home, he sequestered himself with the book and went over the dust jacket twice before beginning to read. The first sentence was as follows. Tedium clung to Todd Gurney like a fearful child to the leg of a parent dressed in party clothes, impatient to be away. Good Lord, Glastonbury said aloud. He turned the book over and looked at the author's photograph again. Flump Richardson looked a little like Slim Whitman. Glastonbury wondered what he had gotten himself into. $30 was a lot of money's work he would have to extract. Cards with inspirational messages on them. Next to Stools was Pattersley's, a stationery and greeting card store. People still wrote a lot of letters in the map zone. They had an old-fashioned postal service whose diligence encouraged old-fashioned correspondence. Standing at the window, holding her small paper bag of purchases in her hand, was Miss O'Crea. She had seen Glastonbury emerge from next door with his purchase, the sight of whom stopped her as she was about to exit. Something wrong, Miss O'Crea? Asked one of the girls who worked in Pattersley's. There is a man out there I don't want to see. That is, I don't want him to see me. Oh. I'll just wait a minute while he moves further away. Miss O'Crea was dismayed to see Glastonbury going in the direction she had intended to walk. Oh, well, she would just have to go in the opposite direction. After a minute, she thanked the attendant girl and left. She had bought a selection of cards with inspirational messages on them. Seeing one of these cards in the mail 2 days later, Dallas Pimento's first thought was, Who is Angela O'Crea? His second thought was, greeting cards. For on the front of the card Pimiento had received was a painting of a monkey on a monkey-sized sailboat. The message, make of your days a knotted rope of memory, didn't matter. It meant nothing to Pimiento, but the concept. Why couldn't he market his paintings by putting out a line of greeting cards utilizing his work? Of course, he would have to have some catchy phrases. He couldn't just slap happy birthday or get your shit together, kid on greeting cards with his paintings on the front. The rest of the week was spent sporadically fleshing out this idea, as well as countering it with others that seemed no more or less flaky. It was fun coming up with stupid messages that amounted to alternate titles for his paintings, which were usually titled with more abstract things like Analog Jester or there was the Stalwart Barber Hoodwinked. Plus, it took his mind off the current series of paintings he was doing. The works in this series were based around what Ron Carter and Herbie Hancock might have been doing on June 19th and September 24th, 1968, although obviously Pimiento had not actually included images of these two musicians in the paintings, but his usual cartoonish, abstracted, almost bestial figures. He ate 2 moon pies on the old sofa in his high-ceilinged living room in a fit of restlessness. His guilt over this was a further motivation to get his own shit together.